Every night is game night, episode 35, Too Many Bones with the designers Adam and Josh Carlson. Welcome to episode 35 of Every Night is Game Night. This week we have a special episode in which we have brought on the designers of one of the hottest new games right now in the solo board gaming universe, Too Many Bones. Welcome, Josh and Adam Carlson.
Thank you. Yeah, it's nice to be here. Thanks.
All right. So yeah, like I was saying before we started the record, a lot of people in the Facebook Guild and the One Player Guild have been playing Too Many Bones, really enjoying it. You look on the BGG page; it's rated 9.8 or something amongst the gamers.
It's holding above 9, which is awesome.
That's really, really great. So we definitely want to have you on. Apologies to the listeners ahead of time. I have a little bit of a cold, a little bit more nasally than usual. So. Apologies to the listeners, but we'll try to get this out as best we can. So, before we get into Too Many Bones, let's talk about Chip Theory. Chip Theory is a really unique company. You guys, you're a new company, right? You haven't been around too long.
About 4 years, but I mean, we just started getting our wheels turning this last year and a half. So finally got into a space and getting some traction.
Yeah, we started out kind of as a hobby. We both work full time, and then just this year is when we're starting to make the transition to start going full time. So that's exciting.
It is really exciting. So you guys came in with a splash. Not so much with the mechanics. Yeah, I mean you have some really great games, gotten some really big traction, but the components, holy crap! The chips, the mats, the inserts. I mean, you came in usually a game company will start. We talked to Scott Gata from Renegade, and he's like, let's do family games, really easy to kind of get into, make a lot of them. You guys went the exact opposite way with the high-end stuff and the heavy games. Talk to us a little bit about your approach there.
It was a little bit of a risky one, but probably the most fun approach as well. I mean, to be able to kind of go after the best vision that you have for your game right from the start was really exciting, but a little bit scary. We had to do a lot of planning for how much these components would cost and the different amounts of production, hands-on production that's needed to test and all that kind of stuff. And it certainly wasn't without its problems. I remember our first few years of you, Adam, with all the chips.
Yeah. We've done a fair amount of quality control,
right,
which you recall.
Right.
We wanted to make sure that all these games were the very, very best, not only quality, but to make sure that everything was just perfect for the very first reveal. When the customers open the game, we want to make sure that everything is exactly the way we would like to open our games. And so that was our vision. Yeah.
Yeah, we've been able to maintain it, but that's the challenge now, is to keep setting that bar a little bit higher.
It opens up an interesting question. I'm actually going to go to the Facebook group to ask this question. This is user Indy DeVries, who asked, why should I buy Too Many Bones? It's so expensive. Why buy this as opposed to 3 awesome smaller games? Which it generated a lot of kind of back and forth, sure. But it's worth asking you guys, why should you buy Too Many Bones at whatever MSRP it is versus maybe even a bunch of other games? Yeah,
it's a really good question. And in fact, it was one that was so important to us that our whole Too Many Bones campaign, the Kickstarter, right at the top, we put that question there and answered it at length, as good as we could. We're really about the visual and the tactile aspects of board gaming, and obviously there has to be some really good mechanics and dynamics and a compelling story behind it for Too Many Bones for sure. But for the tactile and visual aspect, man, the chips are heavy. You're hearing them click as you use them, and you're moving them across a neoprene mat. And if you haven't experienced that, it's different than you will ever expect it to be, in terms of the fun and the play, and then also the visual side of it. When you're stacking these chips and you're removing health chips as you go, it just creates a different perspective than you might not realize. So that's Yeah, that's what I'd say.
In terms of replayability, I think there's a lot of value to be speaking about replayability in a game. It's not just about the mechanics and the gameplay, but also the addiction of having to be able to fondle with and play with the high-quality components. That, in and of itself, adds a little replayability to the game, too. So it's just amazing in that way as well. Yeah.
I definitely recommend people check out the Chip Theory YouTube channel where Josh demonstrates the game underwater.
Oh yeah, that was a new one. I had to kind of raise the bar with Hoplo. We did some what we called "oh crap" videos where I spill anything and everything onto the mats. But I was like, okay, what can we do even more, drastic for Too Many Bones?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
So then it makes me think of a company, Pretzel Games, now Plan B Games. They have two games. They have Junk Art and they have Flick 'em Up, which are both nice wooden boxes, wooden pieces, all that stuff. But then they release plastic versions of both of those games. Sure. Would Chip Theory consider something like that in order to kind of bring the price point down, maybe give more access to more gamers?
It's all possible, as we grow. But I would say that one would be hard. Again, just because of where we come from and how we develop our games, the components are part of the development process. So it's not just let's make a game and then let's make the components as good as we can. The components are built into the making of the game. And so they're just as important as any other mechanic that we use because of that visual experience that we want to generate. So I think, to dumb down the components would be really hard. We would feel like you're losing something in the game, not just being able to play it for cheaper. So I don't know, Adam, do you have a different opinion on that? Or?
I think one of the things about growing as a company, what's exciting is maintaining the same component quality. We can place larger orders and drive down our cost in making these games as well, which will also affect our prices. So hopefully we can keep putting out effective, competitive, good prices with the same component quality as we grow. Also, that's part of a benefit of being online only sales as well. Being able to just not have to have such high margins to be able to use the distribution system. Right. We can sell direct and keep our margins much more aggressive as well. Yeah. So,
So it's not out of the question, but I mean the tactile experience is substantial enough, and the business model stuff kind of works out with it. So we could continue to expect the high quality stuff coming from you guys.
Right. Yep, that's a good summation.
Great. All right, so let's get into it. Too Many Bones. That's I've delayed what people want to hear long enough.
Sure.
So like we saying, a lot of people know it, but a lot of people maybe aren't as familiar. So maybe you can give us just a basic description, kind of an elevator pitch of the game.
Sure. All right. Well, it's a story-based game. It was something that we developed somewhat from the love of two things. One, I would say you'll see influences from World of Warcraft and the building of your skill trees. Those are represented in a real fun and unique way on our neoprene character mats, or the Gearlock mats, as we call them. And these little Gearlock characters, which is a race that we came up with, are unique to the land of Daelor. And they're on a adventure to take out some tyrants to the north that are now invading the Deepwood. And so it's a story-based game, much like, I don't know, it has a little bit of a feel of a choose-your-own-adventure piece to it, where you read a situation and then you really have to make the best decision, and you're left thinking it back and forward again after you're done with that battle. Sometimes you're wondering, well, what if I did the other one? Was that the right play or not? So there's that piece to it. The gameplay itself is still based heavily around the combat. We included some similarities to our Hoplo games in that we do have units that have health represented underneath them in chip stacks, and we really like how that's played through the years. So there's some pieces to that. It's still very tactical, but the main challenge for Too Many Bones, as represented by its name, is that you're rolling a lot of dice. And the question is, can you figure out the strategies within and realize that the bones that you're rolling or the dice that you're rolling are actually things that you can use to make strategic decisions. It's not all about the luck of the dice. And that's what we set out to prove with Too Many Bones. And I think people are really finding that there is diverse and absolute strategies that can be sought after and realized with each of these gear locks, and is not reliant on a good roll in order to be successful with your gear lock. Part of that is due to the backup plans that we created. So one of the things that we maybe okay, I'll talk for myself, but that I disliked is when you're rolling those zeros or those blanks or coming up with bones. And so, typically in games I've played, there's nothing you can do. That was just a tough roll, and you're usually done. Sometimes you just get devastated at that point. With Too Many Bones, we wanted to change that up. And sometimes within Too Many Bones, you're actually hoping for a roll of a bone, because what you can do with those is you can place them in your backup plan, and for each gear lock, they have different skills that are backup plan skills. And it's kind of the concept of, well, my first goal didn't work. I'm quick thinking as a gear lock. I'm going to change it up, and here's what I'm going to do instead. It's not typically as good as my original idea, but sometimes it can be made out to be better. So, yeah. Any thoughts on that, Adam?
Nothing much more to add. That was really well done. I wanted to maybe add a note to our idea of trying to have an entire RPG adventure kind of crammed into one evening, and you can start to finish and then start fresh the next day. If you wanted to play again the next day, try a new gear lock, try a new build. We wanted to be able to encourage you to try different strategies, and not feel like you locked in to earning this skill or unlocking this skill. Now you're stuck with it for days on end. No, this game is about the replayability and starting and finishing in the same evening. So, yeah.
So, I mean, this game, if I had to sum it up, it's a love letter to role players who roll too many ones. Like,
sure.
Yes, exactly.
It's like all the role players who play Descent or who play just like regular D&D or something, and you've rolled all those blank faces and all those ones. Here's a game for you.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly still brutal in its own ways, and you'll see that on the forums. That it's not an easy game by any means, but it kind of like the whole idea of a person being unlucky, in their roles, that's kind of removed from the equation a little bit. And so now everyone's on the same playing field, even though they probably are already. But, it's kind of cool that way. I agree.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that one definitely kind of stood out to me. The second thing is the way combat works. It's a mat, and you have the chips that you're moving around a mat, and the mat is 4x4. So Talk to me a little bit about that, because one of the things that is a plus and maybe a little bit of a minus is you have the mat, it's very tight. Why not make the mat a little bit bigger? And because Hoplo had a big, you could just kind of run around, you're chucking the spears and doing whatever positional play. This one seems a little bit tighter.
Yep, it's definitely a tighter, more concise. It has a little bit of the Origins feel that we had with Hoplo Origins, and I think the biggest reason for keeping it fairly tight is there is so many strategic decisions built into already just 4 baddies against 4 gear locks, and often less than that. Like the max is 4 baddies and 4 gear locks that you could go up against at any one time, and the amount of time it takes to play a turn and consider all of your options needs to be considered in that mat size. And so as we expand that mat, it does open up possible exploits in terms of kiting and all of that kind of stuff that we have in there built in right now, but it's controlled and kept within the realm of what we want it to. Adam, do you have more?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's tied into the length of the game.
Yep.
We wanted to keep the game short, 4 battles, 5 battles for the game. And it's not always centered around the battles themselves. As an RPG, at the system itself, we wanted to be able to be, encounters, friendly encounters, battle encounters, and we wanted to not draw the focus away from building your gear lock as well, the skills, the dice. So we didn't want the battles or the battle map to become the focus of the game necessarily.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, and that's to say, if you look at our past games, you'll also see that we rolled out Hoplo, and you've got your base cities, and then just wait, because you see what we rolled out after. So, we start pretty basic, and there's plenty to come, is what I can say.
Okay. So
already in development, there's plenty to come. So
got it. Okay, well, actually, I was going to save some of the criticisms for a little bit later, but why not? I'm just going to...
Sure, go for it.
I threw them in there. Okay, so some gamers have a little bit of issues with the rulebook, the way it came out. So, and not just the rulebook, but the encounter cards. Sometimes it's a little bit unclear what exactly is supposed to happen on the mat. Are you guys happy with how the rules layout have come out? And all the supplemental stuff like FAQs, video playthroughs, and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. That's a great question. Honestly, we realized from all of the feedback that came in that there's still some work that could be done in terms of improving on what we've put out there. We're working really hard in that respect to improve upon what we have. I think if people will have seen maybe already, but we just put out the new revised reference cards for each of the gear locks that now reference every single dice side on that reference card. We traded up some of the flavor text and some of the personality that we were going for with that gear lock for a little bit more factual information, which I think people are, well, at least what we're seeing, they're responding really well to. That's kind of what they wanted, is on that reference card. They want the facts. They want to see what they can do with those dice. So, I mean, it's a lesson learned. Like, obviously, Adam and I are still growing as designers, and I think we need to be humble in that respect. And, the minute we can't, take that type of criticism and turn it positive, we're not going to last in my mind. So, we want to come off polished, but in that respect, man, the forums are great. We are active on BGG every day, and we're taking notes. So I just spent, many hours on the rule book, again, hitting it up with new things and trying to find a good way to disseminate that information. Obviously, you can't make everyone happy, and everyone reads a rule book a little bit differently. And we have steps that we need to convey. We really can't get into the battle, explaining the battle mat until you understand your gear lock. So, I mean, there was definitely reasons for why we did the rules the way we did. And hindsight is a little bit, people that understand the game now could look back and maybe say, well, this would have been easier, but they're functioning off of information that they've already learned,
right.
So yeah, I mean, we'll make it better. We're working to make it better, and we're going to issue a package for all owners that have our game now, where they can get all those updated components. So we're trying to make it easy for those updates to happen.
If I may add, Josh and I, again, we're young designers. We've never done a game kind of with an RPG style. That's a whole other ball game. This is not a casual game by any means.
Right.
There's going to be situations where, if you do this and then you do this, it's going to create a special, unique situation where our rule set aren't necessarily going to be able to tackle. So we've left certain rules in place that would allow a gamer to, and we always say this around here, it's funny, we call it put your GM hat on and make a decision. But it is true in some ways. I mean, this is a non-GM RPG game, and that's awesome. But there are going to be some situations where this happens, especially when we try to create such out of the box type encounters in this game. I mean, we have so many unique, different, and I think that's the benefit of the game. Is that one of the best parts about the game is you never know what to expect. This is not a normal battle. This is modified in this way. This happened, and all of a sudden it's creating some very special situations. So we're working on it. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So if you don't own the game and you want to get a sense for some of the issues that some people have with rules, check out Ricky Royale's playthrough of the finished version. I think he cut one of the battles, I think he did it 5-6 times.
Yes. Yeah, that one was an interesting episode. He was on with us a number of times trying to clarify this golem. And I'm glad you bring it up, because it's kind of I don't know. For me, that one is an elephant in the room. It was one of those encounters that when we were creating it, it was one I was so excited about, because as a solo player, you do not run into a 20-point baddie ever.
If we could just take a step back and kind of talk through what exactly the battle was.
Oh, sure. So the encounter is basically a solo encounter that allows you, it puts you in a situation where you run into this giant golem, and you're left with either fleeing from it and fighting a smaller battle, or assuming control of this golem. Basically, you run ahead of the golem into a field of baddies, and then you duck down and hide. And now the golem is what you control. And the whole idea was to have this golem fight your battle for you against the other baddies, and try to work the battle down so that you're actually doing damage to both the golem and the baddies, because in round 3, everything turns on you. You're discovered, and now you have to fight what remains. But hopefully by that time, you've broken all of their dice, you've wounded them heavily. But it's a really tough encounter to get all of that instruction built into the back of a playing card. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that was the challenge. We tried to go simplistic on it as much as possible. And again, like Adam said, leave a few things where, the interpretation was going to be up to the gamer. But we tried to get it as complete as possible. Clearly, Ricky, who plays a ton of solo, king of solo, had some questions on it, and that told us, okay, guys, we need to look at this. So since then, we've reworded it. It's part of one of the cards that we would provide in the package that we're producing. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That was one. Yes.
Okay. Well, that actually, in a roundabout way, brings up the something that you actually brought up a couple of minutes ago, which is how difficult the game is. This game is difficult. To some gamers, to the point of frustrating, where it's what's going on here?
Yep.
So before I kind of get into my take on it, because I have played through a couple of sessions, say a little bit more about how you what you wanted to accomplish with setting the difficulty at where you set it.
Yep. Okay. So a big difference between maybe a more typical RPG and this, we really wanted to allow people to improve their gameplay within Too Many Bones. Now, there's so many ways to do that, and I think what happens is that people who are starting out, they learn their gear lock really well, or they just start to get a handle on the gear lock, but that's like 1/4 of what you need to know ultimately to be really successful in Too Many Bones. So then you play through the game and you just get demolished. But you realize in that playthrough that, okay, I was facing, I was facing Nam, and Nam, the baddies that he brings and gets shuffled into your baddie pool are majority melee. So, okay, how could I change my build? How could I scout to eliminate some of that? So there's so many things to consider, which is awesome, because if you're willing to work through it, you're going to improve and improve and improve when you play. But a lot of people won't necessarily have that interest in playing more than 1 or 2 games initially if they get just walloped. So I think that's my take. I know Adam may have his own opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the gear locks are characters that you really have to get to know after just a couple of plays. You can't just read the character sheet and fully understand how they work. There are some very interesting combinations to be discovered within each gear lock and with each other as well. So we've kind of left those out there for people to discover. And I think the discovery of, oh my goodness, what if I try this with this? Dude, we totally got to try this combo of gear locks. I think that allowing the gamers to discover those things on their own, even in the fourth or fifth game, there's something magical about that part of the process as well.
We did this with in a lot more mild, to a lot more mild extent with our Titans in Rise of Rome, Hoplo Rise of Rome. The idea with those Titans was that there is a few specific ways that you can take them out, but you have to learn it and figure out that strategy. And then once you've figured it out, you can actually repeat it, even though you're still rolling dice in that game too, and you will be more successful. And so this is probably even a little bit more on the larger scale of that. But it is interesting to read forums and see people say poison, broken, or Drellin, hardest, tyrant. And now they're wiping him out because they realize that with Gilly and 2 times damage and his piercing arrow, or whatever, that would be for Nam. But you know what I mean? Like that kind of.
For every difficult aspect in Bones, there is an antithesis to it that the gear locks have. Yeah. So that's really cool.
Yeah. Anyways, you have to find it through failure. You have to fail, and find it and find it. And
if you could find it through success, I don't know how that would look. So, yeah.
So then, so it reminded me. I used to play WoW, and you guys mentioned that this was kind of an homage in a little way to World of Warcraft. Sure. It reminds me of when I used to go at a raid boss. We'd show up, we'd get completely wiped out by a boss. We'd kind of, look at our specs, look at our strategy, look at our raid composition, and it's almost like 75% of what we had to do was before we even went back into the dungeon, and we just kind of executed what we planned. So that's a very meta approach to difficulty, where I think a lot of gamers in terms of adventure games are used to difficulty kind of within the game itself. So I think of a game like Mage Knight, where it's a difficult game. I mean, because it's so complicated, but it's difficult in a way where you don't really know what's ahead. Like, you don't know which city you're going to uncover. You don't know which baddies are going to be there. But the way you build is you just kind of build the best that you can and make yourself variable. And chances are, if you're good at the game, you'll do it. You're not going to spend a whole bunch of time researching, oh, this is the counter to the White City. You discover that within the game, within the play. In this game, it all happens kind of before. You have to know that piercing beats this. You have to know that disable beats that. And so it's a kind of a different thing. So I think I don't know, is that was that a conscious thing that you guys went into it? Am I even making sense?
No, you totally are. I'm tracking with you. Yeah, I think it's really observant that you're bringing that up. There's so many things that we want you thinking about before you take that training point, or before you say, well, I'm just going to search for loot, because I like loot. Well, wait a minute. I know scouting for a baddie isn't as exciting as maybe getting a loot card, but maybe in this encounter, you really need to make sure that you don't run into this combo, or and so it's there's opportunities for that, and that kind of takes you back to that choose your own adventure feel to it. We want you really thinking about those situations as they come up. Again, with each tyrant, they have their own tyrant cards going into the encounter deck, and that also has to be kind of considered. Some of them you want to run into, some of them you don't, and so kind of preparing for that. It's definitely, it has a feel of thinking about it before you make your decisions, more so than just building the best well-rounded character you possibly can. So yeah, I mean, I'm seeing some really interesting strategies out there that I never discovered in our playtesting. and yet they're inconsistent. So like, which is a good thing in my mind. It's like, yeah, certain people are finding some success with this, but only against these tyrants. And so, yeah, I think you're right on the money there.
Mm-hmm. So like a lot of role players will go into a game thinking, I want to build my awesome character. I have a character in mind, and I'm going to play him. And you can't do that in this game. You have to look at the boss. You have to say, okay, he has DR4. I can only do, I have to get these skills that do true damage and whatever it is. Yeah. So I mean, just in terms of people who are thinking about whether they want to get this game, think about like what type of hero you like to play. So if you like that thinky, if you like that strategizing before, then this game has a lot to offer in that respect.
Yep. There's definitely some reactionary stuff as well, but I agree with you. It's more heavily on the planned side than it is on the reactionary. So yeah.
Cool. All right. So we mentioned solo play. So we're a solo games podcast. That's our audience for the most part. Hopefully we have a couple of non-solo people. Hi. But yeah, so a lot of our players are solo player. You built a special encounter deck just for solo.
Yep.
And I think that I think of the healer character. What is it? Patches.
Yeah.
In theory, Patches shouldn't be able to solo, but you kind of worked him so that he can, transfer some of his healing to damage. That takes a lot of extra design time that a lot of other games, a lot of designers just wouldn't do. So is solo design, solo play a priority for you guys? Not just in this game, but as a company in general?
Yeah, it's thanks for that question. I mean, it's such a big thing. Like, we don't go into a game without that being on the table from the start. So, and it does take a lot more thought to come at it from that approach. Not let's build a game. Okay, now that we've got this awesome game, how can we make it really cool for solo players? We can't approach it that way, or it's less in our mind for the solo player. So we really came at it and said, we don't want every one of our Gearlocks to be fully well-rounded characters, and there has to be synergies between these characters. And while we do think it's really cool when people do pick up two characters, eventually they learn them well enough that they can play two. That was also something we went into this game saying, no, we're not going to say that this is a solo game, and yet the only way to solo it is to play two characters. Like, to us, then chess is solo. Like, so, we were saying, no, it has to be soloable with one character and really interesting and really fun. And we ran into a lot of challenges with that, so that, you didn't have these characters that were just amazing at everything. One of the things that we did was we worked hard on capping the defense and the attack and how that's trained. And so you'll find that like a Tantrum character has a way of getting those attack dice trained up easier than a Patches. And so, we kept them kind of within their realm of class, but Patches in solo is gonna need to train attack, and he can. And so, we tried to create a nice, well-rounded balance there, where we wouldn't allow Patches to get too strong and just to feel like a Tantrum in the end. And I think that we really were successful on. Like, every character feels extremely different. You have to take them and their approach to the game from, completely opposite ends, depending on which Gearlock you go with. So, yeah, definitely developed with solo in mind right from the start.
Yeah, I would like to add to that. I mean, obviously, I love to play co-op and solo games in my heart. That's my that's my favorite way of game.
Oh man, you and me, man, let's do it. I love the co-op.
From half of Marcus, we started our very first game. It was kind of we had a solo component just built right in, and we wanted to try that out, and it was a big hit. And we developed a wonderful base of fans who are all about solo, and that's just kind of fed us into where we are now. And honestly, we just love developing solo games. And yeah, like Josh said, there's just as much effort put into the solo aspect of it as the cooperative aspect for Bones. So yeah, very much.
Yeah.
So
All right, that our community loves to hear that. It's a small but passionate community, and it really does. Like, especially with like a Kickstarter scenario, you want that passion to come through in the comments and all that kind of stuff, and you're gonna get that from solo players, definitely.
Yeah.
So that's all my questions about Too Many Bones. Is there anything else you guys want to put out there about it, or we think you've covered everything?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Well, do you have anything to say?
Just, it's just. We're very thankful and excited that it's just still selling like crazy these days. We're definitely going to be developing something in the future. We mentioned earlier. We don't really have a timeline on that yet, but we definitely want to keep building onto this this wonderful, wonderful project. So,
well, we have, and to be clear, that there's more bones. Like, absolutely, there's more bones. It's not an if. And the win is becoming a closer and closer date. It's like we're hoping to leak art and stuff like that in the near future. So it's exciting because we'll take it in ways and in directions that I don't think people are even really expecting. But there's plenty more to come in terms of baddies, tyrants, everything.
Yep, and I guess
encounters.
Yeah.
So are we changing up the first 3 special encounters? Those.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good one. There will be different 1, 2, and 3 encounters.
No spoilers, Josh.
Oh, okay.
But and one final shout out to all the fans and all the bones, the community, BGG. Who have helped us. Yeah. The constructive criticism does help us become better designers as well. I mean, all of it. We're just so very thankful.
Yeah, we have. I mean, that campaign, I'll tell you, was by far, not just ones we've experienced, but ones that we've been a part of and backing others. I could not believe how positive it was. And like Adam said, we want the negative and the constructive criticism too, but man, did that fuel us to have such an active and fairly polite community like cheering us on. We're like, well, let's do more. Let's add more. Let's make this thing so sweet. So yeah. Thanks, everyone.
And thank you for the interview.
Yeah, for
sure. Actually, just wanted to let people know that Chip Theory Games is not done. It's not just only more bones. There is a new game. If you follow Chip Theory on Twitter and on Facebook, social media places, you'll know that a game called Triplock is coming to Kickstarter in June, but we are not going to talk about that because we're going to save that for a special episode in a couple weeks. So that'll whet your appetites for more content from Chip Theory Games. So, but in terms of more fan interaction, are you guys going to be at conventions and appearances and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, we have a 20 by 20 booth at Gen Con this year, so that's exploding and really exciting. So we'll generate more interest and hopefully more backers for future campaigns. And so, yeah, we're on all the social. We're definitely on.
All right, thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Alrighty, guys, that's going to be everything for this week's episode of Every Night is Game Night. Make sure to follow us on Twitter, connect with us on Facebook, and Board Game Geek on the Board Gamers Anonymous Guild 1735. We're posting stuff there all the time, and you can join in and kind of help us decide what we're going to talk about next. You can also find us and the rest of the community on the Solo Board Gaming group on Facebook, as well as the guilds on Board Game Geek. All right, guys, so until next week, go ahead and grab a solo game off your shelf, and let's make every night a game night.
Later, everybody.